Long ago, in the heart of western Nigeria, where the red earth cradled barefoot dreams and the wind danced through mango trees like a restless spirit, there was a village so peaceful the birds sang longer before dusk. In this village stood a palace made not only of clay and stone but of love, trust, and unity. And at the center of it all was Queen Adenike. She was more than a queen, she was a storm wrapped in silk. Her voice could calm a crying child or silence a quarrel. Her eyes held the kind of fire only born leaders possess. The villagers said she walked like she carried both lightning and rain in her bones. She ruled not with fear, but with a heart so large it made the strongest men bow, not out of duty but out of love. Beside her, always a step behind but never out of sight, was her husband, King Bankole. He was a man of few words, a thinker, a planner, a man whose silence often said more than speeches. Where Adenike's presence was fire and wind, Bankole was earth and shadow, steady, loyal, hidden. Together they were poetry. They rule like the sun and moon, the villagers often said. One rises in light, the other in silence. But they're always in the sky together. But sometimes even the sun gets tired of shining. At first their reign was perfect. Bankole watched with pride as Adenike gave bold speeches, passed wise judgments, and walked through the village with barefoot children running behind her. He sat with her at night, offering counsel, dreams, and quiet laughter. He never once questioned his place. Until the whispers began. She doesn't even need him, one drunk chief muttered by the fire. All the decisions come from her, another said. He's just a husband. A body beside the throne. Bankole heard them. And for the first time he didn't brush it off. He began to notice things, little things, that slowly chipped at his pride. Adenike made a ruling before asking his thoughts. She attended a village meeting without him. She thanked the chiefs, the guards, even the cook, but forgot to acknowledge him. It wasn't intentional. She was busy, burdened, and tired. But pain doesn't need intention to take root. It only needs repetition. And Bankole? He began to feel small, invisible, replaceable. Each night, as Adenike drifted to sleep beside him, Bankole lay awake staring at the ceiling, drowning in the echo of her absence, even when she was right there. He began to wonder, did she ever need me, or just love the idea of me? The palace, once a home, began to feel like a prison. Then one night the wind blew differently. It carried the scent of something bitter, something broken. Adenike had returned from a long journey, a trip to a neighboring kingdom to secure peace, and the entire village celebrated her. Drums thundered. Dancers filled the courtyard. The people sang praises of their queen. But no one mentioned her king. Not once. And as she raised her calabash in toast, she forgot to look at him. That night, while she slept peacefully by his side, Bankole sat alone in the dark, staring at the crown she had removed and placed casually on the woven mat. He whispered to himself, voice low like thunder still far away. She took all the power. I will take it back. It wasn't hate. Not yet. It was pain. Raw. Untreated. Festering. He began to devise a plan, quiet, careful, cruel. Because not all betrayals begin with anger. Some begin with silence. With forgotten glances. With love that wasn't watered. And as Bankole stared into the shadows of their once glorious palace, he made a vow. If I cannot be her king, I will become her silence. The wind outside howled through the mango trees, almost as if it had heard him. The village slept. But the storm had already begun. Stay with me. Because what you're about to witness is more than just a tale of royalty. It's the story of a broken promise, of love poisoned by pride. Of a queen who ruled with fire, and a man who turned to ash in her shadow. If you've ever felt unseen, if you've ever been betrayed by someone who once said, I've got you, then this story will speak your name. Where are you watching from? Drop 3 hearts in the comments if you're ready to walk with Queen Adenike through the fire. In the early days of their reign, Queen Adenike and King Bankole were everything the village had ever prayed for. Together, they transformed a quiet, humble land into a thriving kingdom where peace lived like a welcomed guest and prosperity walked freely among the people. Children ran barefoot through the fields, elders gathered under the ancient Iroko tree to share wisdom, and traders from far-off towns came just to witness the village of unity ruled by the sun and her steady moon. Adenike wore her crown with purpose. She was more than royalty, she was a mother to the land. Her hands healed, her words comforted, and her presence stirred hope like wind lifts fallen leaves. When she spoke, it wasn't just a queen addressing her people, it was a heart addressing other hearts. And Bankole? He was always near, not in front, not behind, but beside her. He helped build systems of fairness, advised on military peace pacts, and met quietly with chiefs to mediate village disputes. His leadership was quiet but deeply effective. While Adenike stood tall and visible, Bankole was the voice behind curtains, the eyes watching the corners, the mind behind the throne. For a while that was enough. But soon the village saw only one crown. One day after a long council meeting, Adenike returned to their chambers, laughing softly. She held a scroll in her hand, a peace proposal signed by 3 neighboring chiefs. "We've done it," she said. "No more border raids for the next 5 years." Bankole smiled. "You mean you've done it?" he said gently, reaching for the scroll. "No, we, my king," she replied, brushing his shoulder affectionately. "You advised me well." But something in her voice, light, careless, almost distracted, pinched him. It wasn't what she said. It was how quickly she said it, how easily she moved past him and began preparing for her next meeting without even asking his thoughts. He sat down quietly and stared at the floor. That night they dined together. The palace cook had prepared yam pottage and spiced goat meat. The air smelled of onions, oil, and ginger. The chiefs laughed. The servants clapped when Adenike told a story about her trip to Abadan. But Bankole? He said little. When the room was empty and the plates cleared, he looked at her across the bedchamber. "Do you ever wonder if the people remember I'm still their king?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Adenike, loosening the beads from her hair, paused. "Of course they do, my love. Why would you ask such a thing?" He shrugged. "They chant only your name. The messengers bring gifts to your feet. Even the guards salute you first." She laughed gently, not mocking, but missing the weight in his tone. "You know they love you. You're the quiet strength. They just celebrate what they see." But Bankole wasn't comforted. Because love that forgets to see you isn't love at all. The days grew heavier. Adenike continued to thrive, solving land disputes, leading women's councils, even hosting royal envoys from across the river. Her light grew brighter and unknowingly, it cast a longer shadow. And in that shadow Bankole started to wither. One afternoon, while walking past the guard's quarters, he overheard a young palace guard whisper to another, "If the queen ever died, I wonder who could fill her shoes. No one could ever rule like her." The other responded, laughing, "Not even her husband." It wasn't said with malice, just foolish jest. But to Bankole, it struck like a poisoned arrow. That night, as Adenike lay reading an old scroll by firelight, Bankole sat by the window, staring out at the moon. "You make everything look so easy," he murmured. She turned to him. "What do you mean?" "You carry the crown like it weighs nothing." She smiled. "It weighs everything, Bankole. But maybe I've just learned to carry it well." And that was the problem. She carried it so well he felt like his hands were no longer needed. Not long after, Bankole requested to lead a land mediation in the eastern village. Adenike hesitated. "Let me come with you," she offered. "No. Let me do this alone," he replied, sharper than intended. He rode off the next morning, alone with his thoughts, beneath a quiet sky. The mediation went well. The chiefs praised him. For the first time in months, Bankole felt seen. When he returned, no drums beat. No songs were sung. No child ran forward. Because Queen Adenike had resolved another crisis while he was away, one that saved a girl from being wrongfully banished for witchcraft. The people were still talking about it. Even when he tried to step forward, her shadow still covered the land. That night he didn't join her for dinner. He sat alone by the royal garden, staring at the sacred flame tree she planted on the day they married. Its branches reached high, its flowers bloomed without shame. For a moment he hated how tall it stood. "I gave you everything," he whispered into the dark. "My name, my loyalty, my heart." And somehow he believed it wasn't enough. When love becomes invisible, silence becomes dangerous. The palace had once been filled with laughter. Footsteps echoing down its long halls, women singing as they swept the courtyards, and children chasing birds in the early morning sun. But now the air was heavy with something unspoken. Bankole no longer walked through the palace as a king. He moved like a shadow. Silent. Watching. Wounded. And the palace? It noticed. The guards began to stiffen in his presence, not out of respect but out of uncertainty. The maids greeted him politely, but their eyes were always searching past him, for her. Queen Adenike. She had no idea what was brewing. Her days were full, her mind occupied. People from nearby villages came with gifts, complaints, blessings, and songs. She sat on the royal stool from morning till sunset, solving problems, making peace, comforting widows, blessing newborns. She was the people's strength, and unknowingly Bankole's wound. Each evening she returned to their shared chambers with warm stories and tired feet. "You should have seen the women in the market today," she would say, her voice lit with joy. "They've started using dried plantain skins to craft water carriers. Brilliant." Bankole would smile. He always smiled. But inside something had shifted. One night after a royal feast, he returned early to their room. He sat before her dressing mirror, staring at the small wooden box she kept locked. It held her oils, her beads, and most precious, her royal stamp. The mark she used to seal every command and judgment. The symbol of her crown. He touched it lightly, then pulled his hand back. The door creaked open. Adenike stepped in, smiling. "You left the gathering early." "I was tired," he replied. She walked over and placed her hand on his shoulder. "You haven't laughed in many moons, Bankole." He looked at her through the mirror. "Maybe I've forgotten how." She turned him gently to face her. "Then let me help you remember." But he pulled away. That night, while she slept, Bankole stood at the window watching the moonlight kiss the roofs of the village. He felt like a man standing outside his own life, looking in through the window of another's joy. He began whispering to the shadows. "She took all the power. I will take it back." The plan came slowly. Not out of rage but out of pain. Pain, when left alone too long, becomes cunning. Bankole called for a meeting, quietly. 3 palace chiefs arrived, confused but respectful. They sat in his private quarters, sipping palm wine under the dim lanterns. "The queen is tired," he began. "Her spirit is weakening. I fear she is overwhelmed." The chiefs exchanged glances. "She is strong, your highness," one said. "Yes," Bankole replied, "but strength breaks when it's stretched too far. I think it's time," she rested. "And who will lead, my king?" Bankole paused, then let the silence answer for him. They nodded. It began with subtle things. Adenike's meals were seasoned with something new, not poison but not natural either. Just enough to make her feel dizzy. Just enough to make her sleep longer. Forget meetings. Miss names. Speak slowly. At first she brushed it off. "Maybe I've been working too hard," she laughed. But days turned to weeks and the dizziness deepened. One morning she tried to rise from bed and collapsed. "Your body needs rest," Bankole said gently, helping her back under the sheets. She looked at him, her eyes clouded. "Don't let the people worry." "They won't," he assured her, brushing her hair back. "They trust us." And the people did trust them. So when Bankole stood in the palace courtyard and declared, "The queen is unwell. I will lead while she recovers," no one questioned it. They bowed. They followed. And she faded. The palace changed. Guards were reshuffled. Meetings moved to rooms she no longer entered. The throne stool, hers for years, was now occupied by a man who smiled through clenched teeth. Adenike remained locked in her chambers, her body slow, her words muddled. She could feel something was wrong, but couldn't name it. And every evening, Bankole sat beside her bed and whispered, "I only did this because I love you. I couldn't live in your shadow anymore. They never saw me, only you." He wept sometimes. Not because he didn't care, but because he did. Too much. One night, a maid named Abibi, young and curious, slipped a note under the queen's blanket. Read, "They say you sleep, but I know you listen. If you are awake in your heart, fight. We miss your light." Adenike tried to sit up. Her fingers shook. Her breath was shallow. But a spark had lit in her soul. And far outside, the village began to murmur. Not every prison has bars. Some are built with love that forgot how to see. The room was always dim. Heavy cotton curtains, once tied open to let in the sun, now hung like weeping garments. The air smelled of distant herbs and silence. Adenike lay on the royal bed, a bed she once rose from in strength, now held her in a kind of soft imprisonment. She did not sleep completely. Nor was she awake. She existed in the space between dreams and memory, floating through thoughts like smoke through rafters. Words sometimes formed in her mind but died before reaching her lips. Outside, the world moved on. Bankole ruled now. The once silent shadow had become the voice of the palace. He stood where she once stood. He gave orders, received messengers, wore the crown she had carried through droughts and wars. But power does not taste sweet to one who stole it from love. Each evening, Bankole came to her room. He pulled a stool beside her bed and held her hand. Her skin felt warm but lifeless. Her breath came slow. Her eyes half open, staring somewhere beyond the ceiling. He whispered like a man haunted by his own echo. You always shone so brightly. I didn't mean to hurt you. I just wanted to be seen too. Then silence. He would rest his head on the edge of the bed and weep. The servants never heard. But the walls did. And the walls began to whisper. In the courtyard, Abibi, the young maid with curious eyes, noticed everything. The meals, the strange herbs, the changed guards, the missing council scrolls that never reached Adenike's chambers. One afternoon, while pretending to sweep near the queen's door, she paused and whispered, Your people miss you, my queen. No response. Only shallow breath. But as she walked away, she saw the queen's fingers twitch. The village outside had changed too. Though Bankole ruled calmly, a strange stillness filled the streets. The laughter that once echoed from the market grew faint. The elders still praised the king, but their smiles faded quickly. The women still sang, but only lullabies. There was no fire anymore. The queen's absence was a wound no one dared touch, not even with words. And so the silence deepened. But inside Adenike, something was stirring. One night, after many moons, a dream came, so clear it felt like waking. She was standing in the middle of a vast ocean. All around her, waves crashed, but she stood tall. The wind whispered in her ear. You are not lost. You are only resting. Rise. She woke with a jolt. Her breath came sharp. Her fingers clenched. She blinked. Once. Twice. And for the first time in over a year, Queen Adenike moved. That morning, Bankole entered the room like always, carrying her herbal tea and soft yam mash. He placed the bowl beside her bed and sat down, exhausted. Do you remember how we started? He asked softly. You and me ruling side by side. I thought it would always be us. He took her hand. But I got tired of watching the whole world fall at your feet while I stood invisible. He laughed bitterly, tears running down his cheeks. Even now, lying there like a ghost, you still haunt every corner of this palace. He turned his face away, breathing deeply. And then, a sound, soft, barely a whisper. Bankole. He froze. Slowly he turned. Her eyes were fully open now. Her lips trembling. She stared at him calm. No anger. No fire. Just truth. You tried to break me, but I was only resting. Bankole dropped the cup in his hand. Shattered. His knees gave way. He knelt before her, the crown slipping from his head and rolling across the floor like a guilty child. Adenike. But she did not wait for apologies. She stood. Her body weak but steady. Her legs shaking with the weight of rising, not just from a bed but from betrayal. She walked past him. Out the door. Down the hallway. Each step was thunder. Each breath a drumbeat. The guards gasped. Servants dropped what they were carrying. The chiefs looked on with mouths open. And then, a sound not heard in years. A roar of cheers. Children screamed her name. Women clapped. Elders stood. The wind itself shifted. Queen Adenike had returned. Inside the palace, Bankole remained on the floor. Motionless. His eyes empty. His heart crushed under the very power he once desired. And outside, as the evening sun bathed the village in gold, Queen Adenike stood on the palace steps. She raised her hand. The crowd silenced. She said nothing. She didn't need to. Her presence was enough. The sun rose softly over Asaroko that morning. Not with trumpet fanfare or a warrior's blaze, but with the hush of peace, the kind that only follows war. The palace gates stood open not for attack but for healing. Children ran again through the market. The elders prayed, not for rescue but in gratitude. And at the center of it all, beneath the old Irako tree, stood the woman whose name would never again be whispered, but sung, Queen Adenike the Remembered. Her crown now sat lightly on her head. Not because it had grown lighter but because she had grown stronger. She did not weep when the traitors were unveiled. She did not dance when Bankole's truth came to light. She simply breathed, as if her lungs had been caged for too long. And in that breath the kingdom rose again. They said time would heal. But time only offered space. It was courage that did the healing. Courage to face the ache. Courage to forgive what could not be forgotten. Courage to bury the past, not in bitterness but in lessons. Bankole? He vanished like a leaf in dry season wind. Some say he fled to a distant village. Some say the gods claimed him for his betrayal. But Adenike never chased shadows. Her eyes were fixed on the present, on the people, on the promise she made to herself. I will never break what was once broken in me again. She rebuilt not just walls but trust. Not just order but joy. The little girl who once watched her mother beaten for speaking truth now sat on a gilded stool, teaching her daughter how to lead with heart and sword. Her scar, the one left by Bankole's silence, never truly disappeared. It remained quiet and small behind her left ear, like a whisper from yesterday. But every queen needs a scar. It reminds her what she survived. It teaches her what not to ignore next time. And Asaroko? It flourished under her. Not just with trade and treaties, but with laughter, with stories, with love that did not hide. When she sang again under the mango trees, the wind returned. Not to carry warnings but to carry songs. Songs of a woman who had every right to collapse but chose to rise. Songs of a queen betrayed, yet undefeated. And so, dear listener, if you have ever been broken, forgotten, or betrayed, if the one who held your heart turned it to stone, if silence ever became your enemy, remember Adenike. Remember the queen who turned heartbreak into history. Remember the woman who turned betrayal into a bridge for others to cross safely. Because her story is not just Asaroko's. It is yours. It is mine. It is every soul that has ever dared to love loudly, only to be met with silence. And in the end, may we all find what she did. Power. And a song that no betrayal can silence. As the echoes of Queen Adenike's story fade into the winds of Asaroko, one truth remains: even in the ashes of betrayal, a stronger self can rise. If you've ever trusted too much, loved too deep, or been broken and forgotten, this story was for you. Tell me, where are you watching from right now? Drop your country or city in the comments. And if you want me to continue stories like this, send 3 red hearts in the comments. Don't forget, we post new stories every Thursday, Saturday, and Sunday. For story ideas or inquiries, reach us at mariodeconnell2005@gmail.com. Like, share, and most importantly, subscribe to African Stories, Folktales, and Jokes, because the next story might just heal someone you love. And remember, every story you watch here is written, owned, and protected by African Stories, Folktales, and Jokes. Until next time, may your scars remind you of your strength, not your shame.